세계 최대의 자산 운용사 중 하나인 프랭클린 템플턴, 그리고 이들의 디지털 투자 자문 책임자 샌디 카울과 CEO 제니 존스는 블록체인 가상자산에 대해 적극적인 태도를 취하는 이유와 향후 시장의 방향성에 대한 기대감을 전해줬습니다. 이들이 생각하는 미래, 그 핵심은 이것입니다.
What was the genesis or inspiration for you to jump to Bitcoin, but we can put assets and tokenize on the blockchain?
Yeah, I thought Bitcoin was so fascinating because we saw networks taking over so much of what was happening in day-to-day activity and commerce. And this whole network technology was really showing that once you start generating network effects, there really is this snowball effect, and that the community that comes together through a network is really a vast resource, right? So that was the first thing that really intrigued me. I think that my aha moment for the transition to tokenization and the broader crypto community and the impacts that it would have on traditional finance came when I started to understand smart contracts and how they work. Because the biggest issues you have in finance is that, in traditional finance, is that for a lot of instruments, the contract that governs the instrument and the instrument itself are two separate things. And so you spend so much time reconciling and trying to keep these two separate items in sync with each other. And that's where the errors come in. That's where the inefficiencies in the system come in. And so, being able to eliminate those frictions, it was an aha moment for me that really opened my eyes as to the combination of blockchain, the network it builds, and this transferability of assets that can really start to become very high velocity. It made so much sense to me that this is where the future was going to head. It's been an incredibly successful launch across the board, and it's been super exciting because there's never really been a situation like this where so many people launch a brand new product at exactly the same time. And, and it always invites comparisons to a horse race. But what I always try people to get them to understand is that this is going to come in waves, right? The first wave of investors who are coming into this are self-directed investors, right? Next, what will happen is the track record of these Bitcoin ETFs will get built up. People will see how they track to the underlying price of Bitcoin, how the orderly creation and redemption of shares works, how the secondary tradings of shares works, and they will gain confidence in the instrument. And then over the coming 6 months to a year, you will start to see these products be listed onto the wealth platforms. You'll see them start to be included into model portfolios. And that's when you'll start to see the next wave of money coming in. So I think that, you've got a lot of excited, self-directed institutions and individuals who have been quick to jump on the Bitcoin ETF. And I think there will be a whole other wave of money that starts to come in as people gain confidence in this new instrument and see that it's working as people have hoped and expected it to work, and as it has been working.
Let's stick with the markets here. We've got a very special guest this morning. Jenny Johnson, President and CEO of Franklin Templeton, which has $1.5 trillion in assets under management. The 76-year-old firm was one of the roughly dozen to launch a spot Bitcoin ETF just last week after the SEC gave the go-ahead. Jenny, great to have you with us here on set.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start off with the Bitcoin ETF. I do want to, of course, get your take on the markets. But in terms of the Bitcoin ETF, we've seen massive inflows. That was expected in the early days. What do you expect as time moves on? And who are the incremental investors in this ETF, in your view?
It's funny. I'm known for saying that Bitcoin's the greatest distraction from one of the greatest disruptions in financial services, which is blockchain. So a lot of people took that as I'm not a believer in Bitcoin. And yet, launching this ETF, you can see, obviously, the demand that's out there for Bitcoin. And I think there's a lot of reasons why that is. I think that one, from a blockchain standpoint, the ability to pay, Bitcoin's going to be a key component of that. And the technology is going to open up a lot of really interesting types of investment opportunities. We actually launched a tokenized money market fund. We're the first mutual fund first traditional asset manager to actually launch a 40 Act fund on a public blockchain, on the Stellar blockchain. So Bitcoin is just one of the suite of what we think are opportunities here. One of the things that made me a believer is as I went around the world talking to people who would tell you, I had somebody who said, I keep 50% of my savings in Bitcoin because if I say the wrong thing in my country, I could have my assets confiscated. I remember talking to somebody in Israel who said, my parents and their parents had all of their assets confiscated. They keep a portion of it in Bitcoin. So there's a fear component to it that is considered almost a insurance or safety component. But I also think it's really important to fueling what is a next real opportunity in this blockchain world.
Right. So, I mean, the scenarios that you just outlined, that's the case for holding Bitcoin, the actual, you have the keys to the security as opposed to investing in an ETF. Right. So there's a use case for both.
For sure. But that still keeps a floor on the price. Right. Yeah. So it keeps on the floor on the price. And then if you've actually tried to acquire and deal with the keys, it's really complicated. Yeah. Right. I mean, I did it at one point and then I was trying to actually figure out how to get back in. And it's hard. And so being able to open it up and have access to that through an ETF and just simply through your brokerage account is a much better way to access it.
What's your take, just pivoting back to the markets here, what's your take on what we've seen so far in 2024? And if I told you that the Fed was only going to, cut 2 times as opposed to 6 or whatever the market has priced in right now, does that make a difference to your outlook for the year?
Oh, sure. And I actually think, my view, and I've been saying this for a while, is I think that the market's a little overly exuberant about what they think, how quickly the cuts are going to be. I mean, you just saw the Atlanta Fed come out and say wages are, 5.2%, retail sales higher than people expected. I think there's something like 1.4 jobs available for everyone. That becomes, a floor to inflation. And so I think that the market's been a little bit excited. I don't think we're going to get cuts until the second half of the year. And those cuts are probably 50 to 75 basis points total.
And what about in terms of your business, the way you address clients, their preferences? I mean, obviously, all the flows, on a net basis have been toward ETFs more than traditional fund structures, even in, the retirement areas where that's been a difference. But how do you compete in that world?
So, look, our view is, what is our expertise? Our expertise is making active investment decisions, and we will deliver them in any vehicle which our client would like to receive them. So you'll get the same strategy or similar strategy in a mutual fund, an ETF, a separately managed account, a co-investment or a collective investment trust. We're agnostic to how that strategy is delivered. And so ETFs are, obviously, you see it. There's a variety of reasons of why. I think part of that is as the world's moved fee-based, what used to be kind of servicing fees embedded in mutual funds are now charged at the account level. And that has changed to this big, push into ETFs. People often would talk about ETFs synonymous with passive investing. We're passive mutual funds. And what you now see is actually the ETFs moving much, you're seeing a lot more actively managed ETFs, and that's a space that we're very focused on.